Welcome into another episode of Nate Hit the Foul Pole. I am your co-host, Matthew Pine, along with Zach Goodman. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm very good. We got Paul Mancano coming on the show today. Can't wait for that. We're going to talk about rosters and the schedule, so it's going to be a great pod.
And you mentioned his name. I will add him into the broadcast now. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks for coming on, Paul. Excited to have you.
Paul is the host of the Mass and All Access podcast. So nice to get his perspective in here. So, Paul, initial thoughts on the 60-game schedule for the Orioles?
It's about as brutal as a schedule as you can get. I mean, if you try to come up with a tougher schedule, it would be difficult to do so. And that's, I think, part of it is it's the nature of being, having the second worst record in baseball last year is by nature all the teams you play pretty much are going to have better records. But I mean, the AL East already was set up to be maybe the most daunting division in baseball, with the Yankees and the Rays at the top, and even the Red Sox as a potential wild card contender. And then you add in the NL East, where you have three teams that were above 500 last year. You had the Phillies, which were at 500, and really the only break, if you will, would be the Blue Jays, who I think are going to be better than they were last year, and the Marlins in the NL East, who also could be better than they were last year just because they have young talent coming up. So it is going to be an absolutely brutal slate of games. But that being said, look, the Orioles play in the AL East every year, so they're used to this kind of going up against this kind of talent every night. It's just there really is not much of a break in this 60-game schedule.
Yeah. Zach, do you have any
there's certainly
thoughts on
not
that?
a break. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's definitely tough. We're going to play the Yankees a lot, 10 times, and the Nationals, of course, are going to be a tough team on the road and at home. It's a really tough schedule. And you look at the Blue Jays; they've got so much young talent coming up. They have so much going on in their organization. They're coming to the end of that rebuild, it looks like here, and that's a tough team. Where last year they really weren't. So there are a lot of tough teams and a lot of young talent that we're going to be seeing. And the Braves are another team, so it's going to be tough for the Orioles.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, and I guess the only benefit that you could really think of is the fact that teams that historically have great home field advantage in terms of the Yankees and the Red Sox aren't going to have that this year, just because of there's most likely going to be no fans in the stand. So that might be the only kind of positive that you can see out of this. But other than that, their talent is not going down. And you mentioned those three rebuilding teams, have the potential to take maybe not a huge leap. I can't see like the Blue Jays maybe being a playoff contender, but you have Vlad Jr. You have, so many great talented prospects coming up through the Blue Jay system. The Marlins have a ton of guys at AA, AAA level who maybe in the 60-game season, they want to give them a little bit of a run. So it's going to be daunting just about every night.
Yeah, and if you're watching along with us on YouTube Live, you can go ahead and submit your comments. If you have any comments for Paul, what do you think of the 60-game schedule? Yeah, I mean, just to echo your guys' points, like they got 7 games out of the gate against the Red Sox and the Marlins. That might be the easiest stretch they have the entire season. I mean, if you look at it, take the Orioles out of the AL East. In 2019, they had a combined winning percentage of .541. The National League East had a combined winning percentage of .511. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough this year. And the recent PECOTA projections came out and actually said the Orioles should have the least amount of wins at 21.5. What do we think about that, Paul?
I think that's fair. I think it's going to be tough to kind of predict, just because in a 60-game season you're going to have. I think you're going to, PECOTA tends to go down the middle. They rarely kind of say, it's rare that they say a team is going to win 100 games, just because odds are, this team won't go over the top. So they might actually be giving the Orioles a little bit of a boost in 20 games, which is for 21 games, like you said. I mean, it is a volatile kind of number. And I mean, I crunched some of the numbers on a few days ago on the podcast about just like the level of competition that the Orioles are going up against. I think it was 46 games. In 46 of these 60 games, they're going to be playing a team that was above 500 last year. In 29 of the games, they're going to be playing a team that had 90 or more wins. And in 23 of these 60 games, they're going to be playing a team that had 96 or more wins. So it is just absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I basically agree with everything he said. And we're going to be playing a lot of teams that have a lot of wins. And like you said, it's just so brutal.
Yeah, the only oddity I really saw from the schedule in the beginning of September, they play only New York teams for like 13 straight days. I don't know if you guys noticed any oddities, but just kind of the nature of the beast when you're only playing the Eastern Division, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny because, you know, this is probably the first time in baseball history that they released two schedules in a week, in like 3 days, because they released the 2021 schedule, and it actually kind of bears some resemblance. And I think it's just happenstance because obviously these rules about them playing only AL East and NL East opponents are dictated by they wanted to limit travel in this instance, but they are slated to play the same NL East opponents next year. So they're going to play the Nationals, the Phillies, the Marlins, the Braves, and the Mets all next year. And it's kind of strange. They do open the season next year on the road at Fenway, and they close the season on the road in Toronto. So it is kind of weird. I think it's just coincidence. But it's so weird to get two schedules back to back and compare them like we have gotten to.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I noticed that schedule, you know, they definitely bear resemblance for sure. A lot of NL East teams. And I think that's a division that's really just up and coming. There's so much talent there. You know, the Nationals won the World Series, obviously. The Mets are probably a top 5 talent roster in the league. You know, maybe next year when Syndergaard comes back, they'll, you know, have more help. But this is, you know, they've got the Braves. This is a really, really good division. The Phillies are on their way up. So, you know, that's going to be a tough division for sure. I do want to start talking about the schedule here with Boston. What do you guys see as, you know, in Boston as an opponent for the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, I think just level of competition it should be a little bit easier playing the Red Sox. You know, they lost David Price, they lost Mookie Betts. You know, Chris Sale he's out for the year, right? Is that correct? You got Tommy John?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty bare bones. I mean, I like to see maybe they bring up some guys like Tristan Casas or, you know, see Michael Chavis in his second year. Should be interesting, but I think they might be one of the easier teams on the schedule. Never take the Red Sox for granted, but I think it's an easier opponent, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's this is not the Red Sox team that we saw 2 years ago, and not even the Red Sox team that we saw last year that really underperformed. I think it does kind of help that the drama of the offseason is now months behind them. I think if they had just gotten out to the start right after they had just fired their manager, right after the Astros drama was, honestly, in spring training, it was almost like starting to heat up at that point, just because of where everything was going. So, you know, I think that'll probably help them, a little less pressure on their backs, but still, I think they still have talent. They're not an untalented team, but the rotation is going to certainly take a step back, obviously, without Chris Sale and David Price. And you can't lose Mookie Betts and not expect a drop off offensively. So I see them maybe as a 500 team. I think that's right about where Pacoda has it. But again, with the 60 game season, it could be subject to change, but they're definitely not talent wise. They're not as good as the Red Sox teams we've seen the past couple of years.
Yeah. You mentioned the Pacoda projections for the Red Sox, 30.1 wins. So basically exactly 500.
Right down the line.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys...
that's a team that I also don't feel has that much young talent compared to a lot of the other teams in, you know, the Eastern divisions over here. I really don't think they have that much to build with. I do think they will have to at some point soon here launch into a full rebuild similar to what the Orioles did. I think they'll get theirs done a lot quicker than the Orioles have because of how much money they have, the cash flow and the revenue there. But I just don't really see much of a future in their system. I really do like Noah Song, but obviously I don't think he'll debut this year. There's a few guys like Michael Chavis, Matt, you said, he's going to mature a little bit, but this is a team I just think that is kind of spiraling downhill. It doesn't really have a plan to get back. So I don't really see them winning more than 30, like you said, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a down year for them, but I do think that, the Red Sox historically in the 21st century have been a team that goes through cycles fairly quickly. They have the 4 World Series championships in the past 20 years, and sadly, but but in between those years, they have some really down years when they kind of the guys that won them those championships are on the back end, but they have done historically a pretty good job shipping those guys off once they realize they're not good enough, as opposed to just kind of a slow downturn. So I think that's what they were trying to do to get ahead of this rebuild, because they figured, all right, last year was not a fluke. It is it reflects the level of talent on this team. So let's jumpstart this rebuild by selling Mookie Betts. We're obviously not going to win in 2020, not going to win 2021, but maybe 2022 is their estimated their ETA in terms of their talent and their rebuild coming back. But that being said, they're going to have to take some steps to get there, like you said, because their farm system at this point is depleted, and they have some work to do to kind of sell off the pieces that they have to try to get back there within the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, well said. But I know we wanted to move on to our 60-man roster and then ultimately the 30-man opening day roster. I did quickly want to bring up, I don't know if you guys saw the new video boards that are out there in the bullpen. Look pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Go ahead, Paul.
I don't know how that's going to be for the pitchers. Like, I think from our perspective, it's going to be awesome. I don't know if a flashing video board is the best thing for guys to warm up with, but I mean, I think it's going to look, so long as they put a Masson All Access banner on at least one of them, then I'll be happy.
Of course.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was watching the Orioles video they posted earlier today with some of the sights and sounds for spring training or summer training, whatever you want to call it. And they did have the video boards going. Summer camp, yeah. And they did have the video boards going. And I was also wondering, how would that be distracting to pitchers during warming up at the bullpen? I mean, obviously it's a high pressure situation no matter what, but this is kind of an odd placement for them. I am really excited about this because Camden Yards clearly needs a little bit of modernization, and I've been calling for, some video board improvements over the years now. So I am glad to see that, but I'm not sure I like the placement, and hopefully we'll see a Masson All Access banner there for sure.
Yeah, and maybe for the bullpen intros, that would be kind of cool, Back in the day with Zach Britton, they did the flashing lights and all that. So that could be a nice little added feature to things.
Yeah, so. I mean, there are. It's kind of a shame when this thing happened because, I think last year, in terms of the rebuild itself on the field, kind of mirrored like what the team was doing off the field. They made so many changes to the concourse at Camden Yards last year, and our office, which we have since moved out of and moved into the Sinclair studios, but our office looked out onto the field, and you could see the preparations being made. They were still making changes to the concourse. We didn't see the video boards at that point, but we saw them making changes all across the stadium, and it is just kind of a shame that fans won't get to experience it in person, most likely in 2020. But they'll hopefully get fans back in 2021, and they can see it.
Paul, without saying if you know anything yet here, but are there any improvements to Camden Yards you could see coming over the next few years?
I think in terms of just what we've seen, the nice features that they've added. I mean, they recently redid in terms of the warehouse improvements. They were recently redoing the lobbies in the warehouse. I know the Orioles offices got redone, so I know that Mike Elias is a fresh new suite. So so it's that kind of stuff as well, because I just think, as amazing as the ballpark is, like you said, I think all fans kind of recognize that all ballparks at any point in their lifespan are going to need some kind of improvements. So it's little stuff like that. It's the added stuff around the concourse. And then, I think that one of the only knock that I think you could really have on Camden Yards is the fact that you don't have an open concourse. So, you can't, from any point in the concourse, you can't look into the ballpark unless you're looking through a tunnel. So, that's not like a realistic or possible change. But what they are doing, I think, is opening up those walkways that go all around the ballpark. So, it's not like, how you get your food and you want to go to like a spot in the ballpark and you have to go through that tunnel, that kind of like that racetrack like thing around the ballpark. They're kind of bumping that up a little bit. I think partly is to make it a little safer, but also to just kind of like make that more of a spot to see stuff when you're walking around the ballpark, to make it feel like the concourse is more open.
Yeah, I know Zach and I are huge Astro Ball fans, so we were curious to see where the Nerd Cave would be. Where's Sig's Nerd Cave at?
I asked Sig about that, and he said, "Oh, that was overblown in the book. Like we didn't really have a Nerd Cave." And then he leaves, and I asked Mike Elias if Sig had a Nerd Cave. He's like, "Oh yeah, we got it." He's like, you want to come out and see it? Like, we're redoing that whole floor.
It's very secretive.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of fits the character that he was created for him in Astro Ball.
Well, that's good.
Paul, I kind of want to stay along these same lines of modernization right now, and the new Orioles. And I wanted to ask on MASN a little bit. Is there any plans for MASN to kind of revamp these graphics or anything they do with their TV broadcasts?
I think in terms of like a long-term perspective, I think they're 2020 is such a ridiculously difficult year just to get anything off the ground. So I don't know how much that kind of stuff can be expected in 2020. But I think that something that they're always looking at behind the scenes, and it's something that they're always looking for ways to kind of connect to fans in a better way. So the MASN All Access several years ago, starting in 2017, I guess it was really just kind of like the first wave of this new kind of attempt to reach out via social media, via digital platforms. We've already seen The Grind with Melanie Newman. We've seen Jeff Arnold hosting some Orioles trivia on the Orioles website and on their Facebook page. We've seen kind of like this new, and in the offseason, they hired a whole group of amazing videographers. I mean, there is a huge improvement. I'm sure you guys have noticed on their social media pages, and just like the videos and the pictures that these guys are capturing and putting together is unbelievable. So I do think that is something that, those changes are still being looked at. I think the good thing is like this is all stuff that like they're looking at constantly, and they're always looking at ways to improve the overall fan experience, and to now more than ever to reach out to fans, whether they can't come to the ballpark or not, or in 2020 or not, but they're finding ways to kind of like expand their digital platform, which I think is a huge step.
Yeah, that's great news. We did want to move on to our final segment and discuss the 2020 Orioles roster, potential opening day roster. I know they just added some new players to the player pool. Zach, what are your thoughts on some of the new players they added?
I'm excited, especially for Michael Ballman. I'm a big Michael Ballman fan. I think he really fits well into this future. I think he's a future maybe 4 or 5 in a rotation or longer relief option in the bullpen. I'm a huge fan of him. Threw a no-hitter last year at Bowie, which is awesome. So I'm very excited to see him. I'm not sure if he'll make the majors this year, but he was definitely the most interesting guy. Isaac Mattson, the Bundy, one of the guys in the Bundy trade, is also going to make the 60-man roster here. So another guy that, a possible closer in the future, an 8th inning guy or 7th inning guy, really like him too. So he was interesting. Adley Rutschman was added, of course. And, a couple other good names like Keegan Aiken, who might make the majors.
What do you think about it, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Baumann is hugely exciting, hugely being the operative word. The guy is
huge. He's a giant person.
Yeah. Austin Hayes said every time he sees him, he looks like he adds like 2 inches and 40 pounds. He's just an intimidating presence on the mound. And he's got great stuff. I mean, he's got like maybe not overpowering, but a very strong fastball that can touch triple digits potentially. He's got good off-speed stuff. I mean, he definitely is a long-term candidate to, I think, to make the rotation eventually. I think it's a great move to add a guy like Mike Baumann and to add a guy like Adley Rutschman and Keegan Aiken, because these guys are just they get the short end of the stick, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the nature of what's going on right now. And all of these guys are going to be in spring training next year. They're going to be another year older, and they're hoping that they will have developed accordingly. Mike Baumann, I don't expect, unless he wows and surprises in summer camp, I don't expect him to make his major league debut this year. Keegan Aiken, maybe. Adley Rutschman, definitely not. And DL Hall, who is in consideration, would definitely not make his major league debut this year. But at least they're getting time with coaches and time to throw to live batters and to take live BP and to play in simulated games against not just guys of their level, but AAA level and major league level talent. So it's really sucks for all the guys that are not getting this opportunity just because they only have room for 60. But for the guys that do, I know that it's going to be a huge boon for them.
Yeah, I think the one guy that really I took note of from the new list was Cedric Mullins, just because he's a guy that's kind of been forgotten. He was like a previous regime type guy in the Dan Duquette era. He was really billed as the heir apparent to Adam Jones. Didn't really pan out last year at all. So I think him getting back on the right track, hopefully getting some playing time with the Orioles this year, I think that would be a really good thing for him, boost his confidence a little bit. But.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that too. I think there are a few guys on this roster that will be on here this year that definitely have to prove themselves. DJ Stewart is one of them. He's had his struggles. He was a first round pick, another Dan Duquette guy that just really hasn't really panned out. He's had a lot of injuries. He hasn't really gotten his chance yet. So I'm excited to see what he's got. He's got a really great left-handed swing, hits lefties really well. He maybe profiles more as a platoon bat down the road, but I'm definitely excited to see if he can prove himself this year.
And moving on to an actual opening day roster, I guess the first question, we can go position by position quickly. Do we think the Orioles keep 3 catchers now with the 30-man roster, Paul?
It's a great question. I was actually asking Bobby Blanco this the other day because we were trying to figure out if Brian Holiday would make the team, because I think that Severino and Cisco most likely are your 1 and 2 catchers, depending on which way, how these guys look in camp, who's 1 and who's 2. But in terms of a third catcher, got a bunch of guys. They had, I think, 6 catchers in spring training back in Sarasota. They have Austin Wynns there. Obviously, Adley Rutschman's not going to be
Taylor Davis,
and then Holiday. So it's tough. I think they might keep, if they do keep a third catcher, I think it could be Holiday just because he is the most veteran of the bunch. And I think they signed him to a minor league deal, but I think that he has major league experience. They like his veteran presence, so I could see them adding Holiday as a third catcher potentially.
So, Paul, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to say that I think Austin Wynns will be the third catcher. I think they really like him behind the plate. He is a very solid defensive catcher, and I'm personally more of a Brian Holiday fan, and I'd like to see him make the team. I just think that they'll take Wynns based on his defense, and probably Wynns is a guy that can give him a lot of innings, being that he's a little bit younger than Holiday. So they might figure that he could be a nice defensive replacement once in a while here and there. So I do think it will be Wynns, but I think both are great options.
Yeah, maybe Paul, you can give some insight into this, but Austin Wynns seems like he's one of the more jovial, friendly type guys on the team.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good guy. He's I know during the off season, or during the shutdown rather, he's got a place in Baltimore in the Locust Point area, and I don't know if you guys know that area, but the area, yeah, Matt knows it actually. The area, there's like a field. I think it's like Domino Field or something. It's right across from like the Harris Teeter area in Locust
That's
Point.
where I lived.
He was just there we go. And he was playing there. I think he got together a few guys, and they were
David Hess was there too.
Yeah. So literally, you could be walking down the street during this quarantine and see major league talent playing on the field. That's like that usually you see little leaguers playing on. no, Austin Wynns is a good guy. And I think that, there's a reason that, he has been around this team for so long is he has talent, and he has the potential to be a major leaguer. So, yeah, I mean, I think Holiday, I would lean towards him as a third catcher if they go with the third catcher, but also Zach, they could very well go with Wynns, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah. So I did want to move on to the infielders, and I'm basically just going off of John Mioli's projected 30-man roster. So he has 8 infielders. He has Chris Davis, Hanser Alberto, Jose Iglesias, Rio Ruiz, Renato Nunez, Pat Valaika, Stevie Wilkerson, and Andrew Velasquez. Do we have any discrepancies, Zach?
I do. I do not think Wilkerson makes it, but I'm not sure who I'd put over him. Probably Velasquez would be the guy that makes it over him, and simply for the fact that I think Velasquez is a really solid defender, both short and center field, which Stevie Wilkerson can't play short. So I think that would be the reason. I do like Wilkerson a lot, but I just don't think there's a spot for him this year.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the fence about Wilkerson because his offensive stats were obviously not great. I think he hit in the 220s. Just a little bit of pop. He can pitch. That's the thing. Is he's so
he can pitch. He can pitch.
The guy goes wherever they tell him to and wherever they ask him to. I mean, he had never played center field before until last year, and all of a sudden Brandon High asked him to play center field, and he's running into walls, and then makes the greatest play defensively, maybe in Fenway Park history, in right field. But yeah, I mean, I think they just love the attitude that this guy has and the fact that they can use him wherever. It's just whether that can make up for his offensive deficiencies at this point.
And then
I remember.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember when he first came up against the Nationals. He was playing third base, and he made an unbelievable stop. Yeah, I mean, he really can play all around the field, like you said. I just think that Velasquez has the edge for being a shortstop, and also Pat Valaika can play a little bit around too. So Dilson Herrera is another option as a utility guy, possibly. We'll see how it all plays out. But Stevie's a guy I'd like to see make it. He's really athletic. He's definitely one of the more athletic guys on this team for sure. So I'd like to see him make it personally, but we'll see how it plays out.
Then with the outfield, John Mioli only has 3. Obviously, Trey Mancini undergoing cancer treatment. He will not be playing this season. So we have Austin Hayes, DJ Stewart, and Mason Williams. Zach, what do you think about that list?
I did not have Mason Williams on mine.
Okay.
I like the rest of it, but I do think Dwight Smith Jr. will be there. I think that they really, they want the young lefty in the lineup. I know Mason Williams is a lefty too, but I just think that DSJ has had he had a little more time in the majors last year. I just think he'll make it personally over Mason Williams.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, Mioli's assuming that Santander is not going to join the team, which
I'm questioning that. I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess he's just taking it at face value at this point, just because we haven't seen him in camp. But he does have Dwight Smith Jr. in there. I mean, if he appears in camp and it joins the team, I think Santander makes the team. So I think your starting day outfield most likely is going to be DJ Stewart, Santander, and Austin Hayes in center. Yeah. So but I do think Dwight Smith Jr. definitely has the ability to. I mean, if you look at Dwight Smith Jr.'s stats compared to DJ Stewart's, they're pretty similar. And they both dealt with injuries. It's just a matter of I think there's just a little bit more upside they see in DJ Stewart, former first round pick, and a guy that just has not had a whole lot of major league at bats. So maybe he has a slight edge over DSJ at this point.
Yeah, Matt, I missed you saying DSJ. So I just thought you said Santander. So I would think that Santander would make it over DSJ if it comes down to those two. Santander played really well last year, hit 20 home runs. So I would think it would be him, but we'll just see how it plays out with him joining camp. We'll see if he does soon here. But I think I agree with Paul that it would be Hayes, Santander, and Stewart in the outfield.
And moving on to the starting pitchers, this is probably where it gets the most interesting. I think John Means probably a safe bet being named the opening day starter at this point. And then we have Alex Cobb behind him. And then it says Wade LeBlanc, Asher Wojciechowski, and Cole Stewart. It's kind of an interesting list. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I'm a little conflicted on Cole Stewart, though. I just don't know if he proved enough in spring training, but he is on a major league deal, unlike a lot of these guys. I know Malone and LeBlanc aren't even on the 40-man yet. So, being that he is on a major league deal gives him a little bit more of an opportunity, but I don't think Cole Stewart's as good as those two, so I'm not sure if they'll make that decision, but I pretty much agree with what you said.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cole Stewart at this point, it would make it just based on the fact that he, like you said, he was signed to a higher dollar amount in the offseason. And so far Brandon Hyde has been very complimentary of Cole Stewart. So I think he probably is your fifth starter. But Wojo means LeBlanc, I think, is pretty much about as close to a lock as you can get there. So I think that fifth starter spot could be kind of a rotating cast of characters, depending on how Cole Stewart does, assuming that he is the fifth starter come opening day.
And then with the bullpen, we got Michael Givens, Richard Blyer, Hunter Harvey, Paul Fry, Miguel Castro, Sean Armstrong, Tanner Scott, Tommy Malone, Hector Velasquez, Cody Carroll, kind of an interesting name, and Cole Sulser. And omitted from this list are Dylan Tate and David Hess. It's kind of strange. Don't you think so, Zach?
Yeah, I would say so. I think David Hess has a good shot. Just being able to be in the bullpen and making your start here and there. I'd like to see what Paul thinks about openers, and we'll go on to that next. But David Hess is probably one of the guys that could do that a little bit. Take it 3 innings or so. I did think Evan Phillips has a solid shot. I just think they really are high on Evan Phillips. He's got a lot of nice breaking pitches, so I think he has a shot there. Travis Lakins is another guy I could see having a shot. The bullpen, I think, is the most wide open part of this roster right now.
Thoughts,
yeah,
Paul?
Last year the bullpen. How many different guys did we see come out of that bullpen last year?
Yeah.
It felt like, upwards of 60, just like the number of different guys in different situations. So I think that the opening day bullpen could be very different from the bullpen that closes the season in Toronto. I do think they definitely will try to give Evan Phillips a shot. I know he struggled with health, but he's working his way back and still has a pretty high ceiling comparatively. Tate really struggled last year. I really like the guy coming to the Orioles organization, but if it's just tough to find a reason to keep him if he continues to struggle like that. And then in terms of the Cole Sulser, maybe they want to see what they have in him, and I don't know. There are too many names here that you could just swap in interchangeably, and honestly, might a week into the season, any one of these guys could get called back from the taxi squad, wherever that ends up being in Bowie or wherever. And it just ends up being kind of like a rotating cast here.
Yeah, one of the guys that was left out was Eric Handhold. I thought that he's another guy that possibly has a shot here to make this roster, so I was surprised to see him not included. But I do agree with what you said about Dylan Tate. I was really excited too. A former 4th overall pick. He's such a highly touted prospect over the years, but just hasn't really made his mark yet. I still think there's a little bit of a high ceiling there. I saw him pitch in Bowie a few times, and he was really good down there. So I'm excited to see what he brings for sure.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Zach, but I think we're both big Evan Phillips guys, so we're definitely rooting for him to make the squad and also make an impact. But that is going to wrap up our episode. Paul, did you want to plug your podcast where people can listen to it?
Sure. MASN All Access Podcast. You can hear it on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Watch it on the MASN All Access Facebook page. Watch it on the MASN Orioles YouTube page. Anywhere you can really get podcasts, you can catch the MASN All Access Podcast. Typically, episodes coming out every Wednesday.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Paul. We really appreciate it. It was a great time for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully we get some baseball on.
Can't wait.
In Camden Yards at some point, and we start to get more answers as to who's going to be in this rotation. We know now John Means is the opening day starter, but all these kind of fun summer camp questions are starting to be answered now.
Looking forward to
Can't
it.
wait.
Thanks again, Paul.
Thanks.
Oh, cut him off. So thanks again for listening. If you want to take us out, Zach.
Yeah, so you can follow us on Twitter, obviously, and listen to us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, just as Paul just said. And we'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to us on YouTube. And we'll